They told us we were the best, elite, the 101st Airborne Screaming Eagles. We'd trained for months, jumping out of perfectly good airplanes until it felt almost natural. Almost. I was 22 years old in June of 1944. Farm kid from Iowa. Never been on an airplane before I enlisted. And now here I was, about to jump into occupied France in the middle of the night. Funny how war changes things. We knew something big was coming. They'd kept us locked down at the airfield in England for days, studying maps, memorizing drop zones, checking and rechecking our equipment. Drop Zone A, they said. Sainte-Mère-Église. Secure the causeway. Hold until the beach forces link up with us. Made it sound simple. I remember the briefing on June 5th. Eisenhower himself came to see some of the units, looked us in the eyes, shook hands. I think he knew what we were heading into better than we did. There was something in his face, not fear exactly, but weight. The weight of sending thousands of young men into the dark. My stick was good men. Lieutenant Mathers, who'd been a school teacher in Pennsylvania. Johnny Kowalski from Chicago, always cracking jokes, keeping spirits up. Red Thompson, who got his nickname for obvious reasons. Mike Chen, quietest guy in the unit, but steady as they come. We'd trained together, drank together, become brothers. I packed my musette bag that evening. Extra ammunition, grenades, rations. My rosary, even though I wasn't sure I believed anymore. The chaplain came through, offered blessings. Some of the boys took it. Others just stared at their boots. We were scared. Anyone who says they weren't is lying. But we were ready too. Or at least, we thought we were. Nobody's ever ready for what war really is. We loaded into the C-47s around 2300 hours on June 5th. 18 men per plane, packed in tight with all our gear. I was carrying over 100 pounds of equipment. Main chute, reserve chute, rifle, ammunition, grenades, gas mask, rations. Could barely move. The engines roared to life and we taxied down the runway. I was sitting near the door, watching England disappear beneath us. Some of the boys were sleeping, others were praying. Kowalski was still making jokes, but they sounded hollow now. His hands were shaking when he lit his cigarette. The channel crossing was smooth at first. We flew in formation, hundreds of planes carrying thousands of paratroopers into the night. I remember thinking it was almost peaceful up there, above the water, stars visible through breaks in the clouds. Then we hit the French coast. The first burst of flak lit up the sky like fireworks. Orange tracers arcing up toward us, explosions blooming in the darkness. Our plane lurched violently to the left. Someone vomited. The red light came on, 6 minutes to jump. The flak got worse, much worse. I could hear it punching through the fuselage, see holes appearing in the thin metal skin. One of the pilots was shouting something we couldn't hear over the engines and explosions. The plane was taking evasive action, banking hard, climbing, dropping. We were being thrown around like rag dolls. Stand up, hook up, Lieutenant Mathers was screaming to be heard. We stood. We hooked our static lines to the cable. My hands were working automatically, muscle memory from training, but my mind was somewhere else, somewhere numb and far away. The green light came on. Go! 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 I shuffled toward the door. The prop blast hit me like a wall. Below was nothing but darkness and fire. Another plane was burning, spinning down toward the fields. Then I was out, falling, tumbling. The opening shock of the chute jerked me hard, and for a second I thought I was okay. I could see other chutes above me, blossoming white against the black sky. Then I realized we were scattered, spread out across miles instead of concentrated in our drop zone. The plane had been going too fast, taking evasive action. Everything was wrong. I looked down and saw tracers coming up at me. Slow at first, almost lazy looking, then faster. Closer Germans were shooting at us while we hung helpless in the air. Red Thompson's chute collapsed above me. Just collapsed. He fell past, tumbling, silent. Didn't even scream. I hit the ground hard in what turned out to be a flooded field. The water was chest deep, and with all my equipment, I went under, thrashing, panicking, trying to hit the quick releases on my harness. My lungs were burning. Got free. Surfaced. Gasping. Gunfire everywhere. Tracers cutting through the darkness. Men shouting in English and German. Screaming. Someone was crying for a medic. I dragged myself to the edge of the flooded field, collapsed in the mud. My Thompson submachine gun was waterlogged. I was alone, had no idea where I was, and dawn was still hours away. This wasn't anything like training. This was chaos. This was hell. I don't know how long I lay there in that hedgerow trying to get my bearings. Could have been minutes, felt like hours. Every sound made me jump. A cow moving in a field, wind through the trees, distant explosions. Everything was a threat. The cricket clicker saved my life that night. Click, clack, click, clack. The recognition signal we'd been given. I heard it in the darkness and answered. 2 paratroopers from the 82nd emerged from the shadows. We didn't know each other. Didn't matter. We were Americans and we were alive. We moved through the bocage country. Those damned hedgerows that nobody had properly warned us about. 12 feet high, thick as walls, turning every field into a little fortress. You couldn't see 20 yards ahead. Every corner could hide a German machine gun nest. Found more stragglers as we went. By dawn, we had maybe 15 men, none from my original stick. No officers. A sergeant from Kansas took charge. We had 1 bar, a few rifles, my waterlogged Thompson that I'd managed to clear. Not exactly an invasion force. That's when we heard the church bells, Sainte Mère Église. We'd overshot our drop zone, but not by much. The sergeant decided we'd head there, try to link up with whoever'd taken the town. We moved through a small village. Don't remember the name. It was empty. Doors hanging open. A dead cow in the road, bloated. Smelled like copper and shit. The first German we encountered was a kid. Couldn't have been 18. He came around a corner and we all froze for a heartbeat. He was as scared as we were. His rifle was slung over his shoulder. The bar gunner cut him in half, just like that. The kid folded over, his insides on the outside, and he made this sound. Not a scream, more like a sigh, like he was disappointed. He died right there in the road, and we stepped over him and kept moving. I threw up behind a stone wall. Nobody said anything. We ran into a German patrol around midday. Real soldiers this time, not scared kids. They had us pinned down in a ditch, and they knew what they were doing. MG-42 tearing up the hedgerow above our heads. That sound. You never forget it. Like tearing canvas, but faster. Ripping the air apart. Private Morrison, kid from Alabama I'd just met. He got hit trying to move positions. Took a round in the throat. He drowned in his own blood while we were trapped there, unable to reach him, unable to do anything but listen to him gurgle and thrash. The sergeant made a decision. Ordered 3 of us to lay suppressing fire while he and 2 others flanked right. It worked. We killed 4 Germans, wounded 2 others. The sergeant put bullets in the wounded ones. Didn't even hesitate. Can't take prisoners, he said. Can't spare the men to guard them. I wanted to argue. Wanted to say something about the Geneva Convention, about being civilized. But I looked at Morrison's body, and I shut my mouth. This wasn't about civilization anymore. By late afternoon, we'd linked up with a larger group, maybe 40 paratroopers, a couple of glider troops, even a pilot whose plane had been shot down. An actual captain was there, trying to make sense of where everyone was. The news wasn't good. We were scattered from hell to breakfast. Units were under strength, missing equipment, behind schedule, The invasion was happening on the beaches. We could hear the naval bombardment, but we were supposed to be holding the exits, and we barely held the ground we were standing on. That night, they sent us to take a manor house the Germans were using as an observation post. We went in just after dark. I was in the second wave through the door. The fighting inside was close, room to room. I shot a German at maybe 5 feet, saw his face clearly in the muzzle flash. Older guy, maybe had kids back home. He fell backward into a chair and just sat there, head lolled to one side, blood spreading across his gray uniform. We found maps in the house. Intelligence, the captain said. Good work. But all I could think about was the German sitting dead in that chair, and how his face looked like my uncle's. Johnny Kowalski found me that night. I almost shot him before I recognized his voice. He was the first guy from my stick I'd seen since the jump. We grabbed each other, held on tight. He was crying. Told me Lieutenant Mathers had drowned in the flooded fields, gear too heavy, couldn't get his chute off in time. Mike Chen was dead too, shot in the chute before he even landed. We'd been in France for less than 24 hours, and my unit was gone. Just gone. We sat there in that captured German position and shared a cigarette and didn't say anything because there was nothing to say. The guns never stopped. Never. Even when you weren't in combat, you could hear them. Artillery, small arms, tanks. The sound of it got into your bones, into your skull. You stopped noticing after a while, and that's when you knew something fundamental had broken inside you. The days blurred together. June 7th, 8th, 9th. We held positions, counterattacked, got pushed back, pushed forward again. The bocage fighting was worse than anyone had imagined. Every hedgerow was a new battle. Every field cost blood. They told us the beaches had succeeded. Utah, Omaha. The boys had made it inland. Good news, they said. We just had to hold. Just had to keep the Germans from reinforcing the coastal defenses. Simple. Nothing was simple. We fought for a crossroads near some village I can't pronounce. Spent 2 days in a firefight over maybe 300 yards of ground. German 80s were zeroed in on our position. You could hear them coming, that freight train sound, and then the explosion and the screaming. A shell landed in a foxhole with 2 guys I'd gotten to know, Jimmy Blake and Paul Torres. Just obliterated them. When the smoke cleared, there wasn't enough left to identify. We scooped what we could into ponchos and marked the spot, kept fighting. You stop thinking of them as people after a while. The dead, I mean. They become problems to solve. How do you advance with machine gun fire from that tree line? How do you clear that building? The faces stop mattering because if they matter, you can't function. Kowalski was changing. We all were. But I could see it in him especially. The jokes stopped. He got quiet, methodical, started taking risks that weren't necessary, volunteering for patrols, point man positions. Like he was trying to get it over with. I understood. Part of me was doing the same thing. June 10th or 11th, I'm not sure anymore, we ran into a French family hiding in a cellar. Old couple, maybe 60, and their daughter who was pregnant. They'd been there for 4 days without food. The old man kept thanking us, kissing our hands. The daughter just stared with these empty eyes. We gave them our rations, moved on. Never found out what happened to them. Hope they made it. But I don't think about it too much because hope was getting scarce by then. The hedgerow fighting taught us things they never covered in training, like how to use German stick grenades because they were better than ours for close work, how to tell the difference between German and Allied tank engines by sound alone could save your life, how to sleep sitting up with your rifle across your knees because you might need to shoot in seconds, how to keep moving after you've seen your friends die. We took a German position on June 12th. Overran it just after dawn. found a bunker with maybe 10 Germans inside. Young guys, mostly, terrified. They surrendered, hands up, screaming, "Kamerad! Kamerad!" We were supposed to process them, send them back to the rear. But we were exhausted, low on ammunition, and command kept saying we couldn't spare men for guard duty. A lieutenant I didn't know made a decision, took the prisoners behind the bunker. The shots were muffled, but we all heard them. 10 shots. The lieutenant came back alone. Nobody said anything. We searched the bunker for supplies and moved on. I think that's when I understood we were no longer the men who'd left England. The farm kid from Iowa who believed in right and wrong, who went to church on Sundays, who thought war had rules. He was dead. What was left was something harder. Something that could hear 10 gunshots and feel nothing. By mid-June, we'd been reinforced. New paratroopers came in, fresh-faced kids who still had that look in their eyes. The look we'd had 9 days earlier. They asked questions. What's it like? How many Germans have you killed? When do we advance? We didn't answer much. What could we say? How do you explain that time stops meaning anything? That you can't remember what day it is, but you remember exactly how your friend looked when a mortar round killed him? That you're not afraid of dying anymore. You're afraid of surviving. Kowalski got hit on June 14th. Sniper round, clean through the shoulder. Lucky shot, really. Few inches to the left, and it would have been his heart. They evacuated him. He looked relieved when they loaded him on the jeep. Guilty about the relief, but relieved. I was glad for him. He was going home. Maybe he'd make it back to something like normal life. I wasn't so sure about the rest of us. The nights were the worst. That's when the numbness wore off a little and you had to think about what you'd done, what you'd seen. The faces came back then. The German kid in the road, Lieutenant Mathers drowning, the sounds of those 10 gunshots. I'd pray sometimes, using the rosary I'd kept, but the words felt empty. If God was watching Normandy in June of 1944, he wasn't doing much to help either side. It happened on June 17th, 11 days after we'd jumped into the darkness over Normandy. 11 days that felt like 11 years. We were pushing towards Saint-Sauveur-le-Vicomte, another town, another objective. The Germans were falling back, but fighting hard for every inch. We'd been advancing through the hedgerows since before dawn, taking casualties, gaining ground slowly. I was on point with a new kid, replacement who'd arrived 2 days earlier. Tommy something, from Boston. He kept asking me questions, wanted advice on how to stay alive. I told him to keep his head down and his eyes open. Standard stuff. But I was barely listening to my own words. We came around a hedgerow, and there was a German machine gun nest. They'd been waiting. They opened up before we could react. Tommy took the first burst, caught him across the chest. He was dead before he hit the ground. The rest of us scattered, diving for cover, returning fire. The MG-42 kept hammering, chewing up the hedgerow, kicking up dirt. I was in a ditch with 2 other guys. Sergeant Willis and a private named Garcia. We were pinned down bad. Couldn't advance, couldn't retreat. The Germans had us in a perfect kill zone. Willis decided to do something, started crawling along the ditch toward a position where he could flank them. Told us to keep them busy. He made it maybe 20 yards before a German grenade landed right next to him. The explosion wasn't that big, but Willis, he just came apart, not all at once. He was still alive, still conscious, looking down at himself, at what the grenade had done, making these sounds. Garcia froze, just completely locked up, staring at Willis, not moving, not shooting, nothing. I don't remember making a decision. I just moved. Got up and ran at the German position, firing my Thompson, screaming. Not words, just sound. Pure rage and horror and something that wasn't quite human anymore. I killed 3 of them, point blank. Emptied my magazine. Then I grabbed a German rifle and beat the 4th one to death with it. Beat him long after he was dead. Beat him until my arms gave out and I collapsed next to the bodies. Garcia found me there, pulled me away. I was covered in blood. Theirs, maybe some of mine. I couldn't tell. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, couldn't catch my breath. Everything was too bright, too loud, too much. They pulled me off the line, sent me back to an aid station. Combat fatigue, they called it. Shell shock. Battle exhaustion. Fancy words for broken. I sat in that aid station for 3 days. Didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Willis looking down at himself. Saw the German's face when I was beating him. Saw Tommy from Boston, who I'd failed to keep alive. Saw Red Thompson falling past me in the darkness. Saw all of them, all the dead. A doctor talked to me, asked questions. I couldn't answer most of them. What was I supposed to say? That I'd become a monster? That I'd discovered I was capable of beating a man to death with my bare hands? That I'd felt nothing when those prisoners were shot? Nothing when we killed that scared kid in the village? That the worst part wasn't what I'd seen, but what I'd become. They sent me back to my unit on June 21st, said I was fit for duty. Maybe I was, physically. But something fundamental had snapped inside me. I could still function, could take orders, fire my weapon, advance when told to advance, but it was automatic now, mechanical. The farm kid from Iowa was completely gone. What walked around in his body was something else, something that could kill without feeling, something that understood that all the talk about honor and duty and fighting for freedom was just noise, pretty lies to make the horror seem meaningful. We were just meat that killed other meat until somebody decided to stop feeding us into the grinder. I rejoined what was left of my platoon near Cherbourg. We'd lost more men. New replacements had arrived. They looked at us, the ones who'd survived since D-Day, with something like awe. Like we were veterans, heroes. They didn't understand that we weren't heroes. We were ghosts. We'd died in Normandy, just like the ones left behind in the fields and hedgerows and flooded marshes. We just hadn't stopped walking yet. The fighting continued. We took Cherbourg on June 26th. Command called it a victory. Maybe it was, but I couldn't feel anything about it. Couldn't feel anything about much by then. I'd broken somewhere in that ditch watching Willis die, and unlike a bone that heals stronger, I knew I'd never be whole again. I made it through the rest of the war, fought through France, jumped into Holland during Market Garden, froze in Bastogne during the Bulge, got a Bronze Star somewhere along the way. Don't remember what for. They said I showed valor. Valor. Like there's anything valorous about what we did. I came home in 1945, stepped off the train in Iowa, and my mother cried, and my father shook my hand, and everyone wanted to hear stories, war stories, the exciting kind, the kind where America wins and the good guys come home. I couldn't tell them those stories because I didn't have them. What was I supposed to say? That I'd beaten a man to death? That I'd stood by while prisoners were executed? That I'd stopped feeling human somewhere in the mud and blood of Normandy and never quite figured out how to start again? So I said what they wanted to hear, made up some things, left out most of it. They seemed satisfied. They got to have their hero son, and I got to keep the truth locked away where it couldn't hurt them. But it hurt me, still does, every single day. I tried to go back to normal life, worked on the farm, got married in 47 to a good woman named Helen, had 2 kids, built a life that looked right from the outside. But inside, I was still in Normandy, still hearing the MG 42s, still seeing Willis and Tommy and Red and all the others. The nightmares never stopped. Helen would shake me awake, and I'd be screaming or crying or both. Sometimes I'd wake up with my hands around her throat before I realized where I was. She stayed with me anyway. Don't know why. Don't know if I deserved it. I couldn't explain it to her. Couldn't explain it to anyone who wasn't there. How do you tell someone that you're terrified of the 4th of July because fireworks sound like artillery, that you can't go to church because you stopped believing in God somewhere between the Channel and Cherbourg, that you scan every room for exits and threat positions without thinking about it, that you're always waiting for the next ambush? I met Kowalski again in 1952, VFW reunion. He'd lost the arm. Infection set in after he got hit. They had to amputate. He was drinking heavy. We didn't talk much about the war, didn't need to. We understood each other in a way nobody else could. He shot himself in 1958, left a note that said he was tired, just tired. I understood that, too. Over the years, I've watched them make movies about D-Day, watched them turn it into glory and heroism and noble sacrifice. They show the beaches mostly, show men charging through bullets, brave and determined. And it happened that way, I guess, for some of them. But they don't show the days after, the weeks of grinding through the hedgerows, the fear and exhaustion and moral compromises, the way you become something other than human when you're living in hell, the way you never quite become human again even after you leave. They don't show the cost, not the real cost. 20 years now since I jumped into Normandy. My son asked me about it the other day. He's 16, studying World War II in school. Wanted to know what it was really like. I looked at him, at his innocent face, and I couldn't do it. Couldn't poison him with the truth. I told him we fought for freedom, that it was hard but necessary, that I was proud to serve. All true in a way, but not the truth, not the whole truth. The truth is that war doesn't make you a hero. It makes you a survivor or a casualty, and sometimes both at once. The truth is that I left part of my soul in a flooded field in France, and I've been trying to function without it ever since. The truth is that every man I killed, German or otherwise, stays with me. Their faces, their eyes in that final moment. The truth is that we were all somebody's son, somebody's brother. And we killed each other because men in rooms far from the fighting told us to. And we did it, and we can't undo it, and we have to live with it forever. People thank me for my service sometimes, shake my hand, call me a hero. I smile and nod because that's what you do, but inside I'm thinking about Willis and Tommy and Red, about Lieutenant Mathers drowning in his parachute harness, about Mike Chen shot before he touched ground, about the German kid we killed in the village, about the prisoners executed behind the bunker, about all the ones who didn't come home. But here's the thing nobody understands. I didn't come home either. Not really. A body came home wearing my face, carrying my name. It walks and talks and goes through the motions of living. But the boy who jumped out of that C-47 on June 6th, 1944, he's still there, still falling through the darkness, still waiting to hit the ground. We all are. All of us who went into that meat grinder. We never left Normandy. We're still there in the hedgerows, in the flooded fields, in the moments that broke us, still fighting a war that everyone else says is over. I'm 64 years old now, sitting in this chair, talking into this recorder. My hands still shake sometimes. I still can't handle loud noises. I still see their faces when I close my eyes. They gave us medals and parades and called us the greatest generation. But they never asked what it cost us to earn those titles. Never asked what we left behind in the mud and blood. Never asked if we thought it was worth it. I don't know if it was worth it. I honestly don't know. We stopped Hitler, saved the world from fascism. That matters. That has to matter. Or else what was it all for? But I also know that war doesn't create heroes. It creates ghosts. And those of us who survived, we're just ghosts who learned how to fake being alive. Sometimes I wonder what the farm kid from Iowa would think if he could see what he became. What he'd think about the man who beat another man to death, who stood by while prisoners were shot, who learned to kill without feeling and survive without living. I think he'd be horrified. I think he'd cry. I think he'd understand that this is what war really does. Not the movies, not the medals. This hollow feeling, this permanent damage, this understanding that you sacrificed not just years of your life, but your very humanity, and you can never get it back. They say we won the war. Maybe we did. But war doesn't have winners, just different kinds of losers. Some of us lost our lives. The rest of us lost something harder to name, but just as real. 20 years later, and I'm still trying to find my way home from Normandy. Still trying to figure out how to be human again. Still carrying June 6th, 1944 in my bones. I don't think I'll ever make it back. I don't think any of us will. We jumped into the darkness that night, and we're still falling.